This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Greta Thunberg's words echoed through the United Nations and across the world. A child shaming nations for destroying the planet. To millions, she became a symbol of truth and courage. To others, she was a sign that something had changed, that fear itself had become the message. For the first time in history, environmentalism wasn't just a cause, it was policy. Billion-dollar programs, carbon markets, and global treaties built on one untested promise that government could rewrite the laws of nature. They called it a Green New Deal. But before we decide whether it can save the world, we should ask who it really serves. Who holds the power when every breath, every mile, every light switch carries a price? And when saving the planet becomes a business, who's really being saved? Let's try and find out.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America.
That was Vice President Al Gore in 2006. The moment climate change stopped being a scientific discussion and became a political crusade. But even while preaching sacrifice, Gore himself lived the life of a king. Multiple mansions, private jets, and an energy bill that dwarfed entire neighborhoods. His Nashville estate alone consumed over 20 times the power of an average American home. Yet his film, An Inconvenient Truth, declared the science settled, the danger imminent, and humanity on a clock. At the time, 2005 was indeed the hottest year on record by NASA and NOAA, but that record only stretched back to the late 1800s, when a few hundred thermometers in Europe and North America tried to represent the entire planet. By today's standards, accurate global measurements didn't begin until 1979, when satellites finally gave us full planet coverage. Before that, most of it was educated guesswork, stitched together by models and assumptions. To put this in perspective, mainstream science says the Earth is about 4.54 billion years old. That means our precise measurements cover less than the blink of an eye, a few billionth of a percent. From that narrow record emerged a multi-billion-dollar movement in a new kind of faith, not spiritual, but financial, built on fear. And that panic indeed paid off. Al Gore wasn't just warning the world about carbon, he was investing in it. 2 years before his documentary hit theaters, he co-founded Generation Investment Management with a former Goldman Sachs executive. Their mission was simple: turn environmental concern into capital. They called it sustainable investing. Wall Street called it scalable. By 2008, carbon had a price tag, and trading pollution became a global market. Companies could buy and sell the right to emit. Polluters paid, but banks, brokers, and fund managers earned fees for every trade and every credit issued. The cost of pollution became someone else's profit, and the green economy was born. Industrialized nations agreed to binding limits on emissions and created the first international carbon markets. By the 2000s, the European Union expanded that idea into the EU emissions trading system, eventually covering power plants, factories, and airlines across the continent. And by 2010, the concept of net zero had become a moral badge for governments and corporations alike. It was a clean ledger, not a clean planet. The climate crisis had evolved into a global economy, and the only thing greener than that message was the money behind it. Then came the next evolution: carbon taxes and trading. Carbon tax sounds simple. The government puts a price on carbon dioxide, the gas released when we burn oil, coal, or natural gas. The idea is that if pollution costs money, companies will pollute less. In reality, it's a hidden cost built into everything we use. Energy runs the world. It powers trucks, factories, homes, and farms. When you tax carbon, you tax the entire chain that keeps modern life moving. Companies don't pay those costs, consumers do. Prices rise, fuel surcharges appear, and heating bills climb. The atmosphere doesn't change, the balance sheet does. Supporters call it market-based climate policy. They claim the revenue funds clean energy projects. But real audits tell a different story. In the EU, less than half of the carbon auction revenue went to environmental programs. And in Canada and Australia, most of it was recycled into rebates or general spending. The rest of the money disappears into government budgets or other line items few voters ever see or audit. Then came the next evolution: carbon trading. Instead of a flat tax, corporations could buy carbon credits, permits to pollute, backed by promises of reduction elsewhere. It created a new global marketplace, a financial instrument built on air. Polluters could pay to keep polluting, as long as they funded someone else's project to plant a tree or capture methane halfway around the world. In theory, offsets were supposed to help pay farmers in the developing world to preserve forests and balance out pollution elsewhere. But most of that money never reached the people on the ground. Governments and brokers signed the deals. Locals lost the land. Companies in the West kept burning the fuel, while villages in Africa were told to stop grazing their cattle. The carbon stayed on paper, not in the air. The rich kept burning, the poor kept paying.
5 years ago, we introduced a vision for social and ecological transformation big enough to save our planet: the Green New Deal. The critics jumped against it immediately. They said it was an impossible dream, too impractical, not serious enough, and they were wrong. In the last 5 years, we have made major strides in tackling the climate crisis and creating millions of jobs by building together a diverse coalition of people committed to a better future. From community organizers and frontline climate advocates to labor organizers and everyday working people, we are winning with a movement that rejects the dystopian future and is committed to building a new one.
AOC's voice fills the room, confident, triumphant. She says the Green New Deal created millions of new jobs, lifted people out of poverty, and set America on a clean path to the future. It's a powerful claim, but unfortunately, it isn't accurate. The Green New Deal was a congressional resolution, not a law. What exists today are offshoot programs, energy subsidies, electric vehicle incentives, and manufacturing credits, folded into later legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Those created hundreds of thousands of jobs, mostly construction, short-term projects, and factory startups, but nowhere near millions. The millions of jobs figure came from the economic modeling, not the actual results, optimistic forecasts written before a single dollar was spent. If every Green New Deal proposal had passed and been fully funded, models projected millions of jobs, but projections aren't proof. Theory and truth don't share the same ledger. But while politicians promised millions of new jobs, tens of thousands of jobs quietly disappeared. Under the banner of the Green New Deal, investors pulled capital from fossil fuels, regulators tightened compliance, and America's coal belt turned into a graveyard of shuttered plants. Over 40,000 coal jobs vanished in 10 years. Towns built upon power stations reduced to silence as utilities chased subsidies for wind and solar. Oil refineries followed. In California, entire facilities were converted or closed outright, wiping out thousands of high-paying union jobs. And for every refinery worker laid off, 5 to 7 support jobs disappeared with them. Truck drivers, maintenance crews, restaurants, and small businesses that kept those towns alive. These weren't just statistics. They were livelihoods, replaced not by green factories or renewable prosperity, but by headlines and empty promises. The old energy economy was being dismantled faster than the new one could stand. And the Green New Deal didn't just stay in Washington. Within a year, its language, net zero, sustainability, and equity appeared in speeches from London to Brussels and from Davos to Beijing. It wasn't a law anymore, it was a global script. Then the United Nations promoted Agenda 2030, the European Union introduced Fit for 55, and the World Economic Forum rebranded capitalism itself as stakeholder capitalism. The words changed, but the mission didn't. Reshape economies through climate compliance and centralized oversight. Every nation was told to reach net zero emissions by 2050, a goal that sounded scientific but rested largely on carbon accounting. Instead of reducing output, industries simply offset it. For every ton of carbon released, a credit was purchased, a tree was promised, or a project was announced somewhere else. The pollution didn't stop, the paperwork just got cleaner. And yet, no one can even agree on what safe carbon emission looks like. Scientists talk about carbon budget, the amount we can burn before the planet warms too much. But the numbers swing by hundreds of billions of tons, depending on who's counting. There's no finish line, no magic threshold, just a moving target wrapped in certainty. The irony is that the entire world is being taxed, regulated, and restructured around a carbon number that doesn't actually exist. But regardless of an agreed-upon carbon limit, trillions of dollars continue to flow through new green bonds, ESG funds, and carbon markets. Banks and corporations reinvented themselves as environmental saviors while still extracting, refining, and drilling under different names. Developing countries borrowed to comply, trading sovereignty for sustainability loans they could never repay. The same institutions that once financed industry now finance guilt, and both were profitable. Climate policy became less about climate and more about control. Who can build? Who can travel? Who can grow? Who could produce? And just like that, the crisis became a currency. Every regulation, every limit, every tracked carbon footprint justified as a moral necessity. Saving the planet had become a business plan, and the only thing growing faster than emissions was power. If you follow the money, the saviors start to look familiar. The same investment firms that once financed oil now lead the green transition. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, managing over 20 trillion combined, now shape entire industries through ESG scores that turn morality into a metric. Every rule, every restriction, Every new program creates another fee, fund, and market. The governments take their share through carbon taxes, green bonds, and climate subsidies. NGOs and consultants collect grants and administration fees to manage the paperwork. And the oil giants didn't disappear, they rebranded. The same companies that once pumped the fuel now sell the forgiveness, investing in offsets and renewable portfolios funded by the same public they once supplied. And who pays for it all? The people who can't afford to play the game. The worker paying more at the pump. The family watching their electric bill climb. And the small business squeezed by the cost of compliance. The truth is simple. The planet isn't the product. You are. Your labor, your choices, your dependence on the system that tells you it's saving you. Scientists tell us the planet's recent warming is largely man-made, driven by modern industry and carbon. Maybe they're right, but Earth's history didn't begin in the industrial age. Long before the first factory rose or the first engine turned, the planet's climate shifted on its own, sometimes violently. Entire civilizations vanished beneath those changes. Doggerland, once a land bridge between Britain and Europe, lies drowned beneath the North Sea. The ancient city of Pavlopotri rests off the coast of Greece, about 5,000 years old and roughly 10 to 15 feet underwater. And off Japan's coast, the Yonaguni Monument sits nearly 80 feet below the surface. None of them burned coal, drilled oil, or drove cars. They were swallowed by nature's own cycles of ice and melt, a reminder that Earth has always changed, with or without us. So when modern prophets promise salvation through taxes, markets, and fear, remember this: the seas were rising long before we learned to measure them, and they'll keep rising long after the last slogan fades, with or without our help. Don't get me wrong, we should respect this planet. It's the only one we've got. We should use cleaner energy, reduce waste, and leave something better behind for those who come after us. But progress has to make sense. It has to work for everyone, not just the corporations, the governments, or the investors who've learned to profit from fear. Real stewardship means balance, protecting the earth and the people who live on it. Anything less isn't environmentalism. It's control dressed as virtue. Because the truth is, clean energy isn't always clean. Solar panels and wind turbines depend on toxic mining for lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals. Most of it done in countries with no environmental safeguards. And when they break or wear out, they become hazardous. Turbine blades can't be recycled. They're buried in landfills the size of football fields. Solar panels leak lead, cadmium, and chromium when discarded. Compared to gas or coal, they produce less power, cost more to maintain, and die decades sooner. The planet doesn't need false solutions, it needs honest ones. Let us know your thoughts on the Green New Steel in the comments below.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.